Thank you so much, Bob and Janet Sloan, for sharing your story with us and introducing us to Joey. It's just incredibly generous of you to introduce us to your family. Thank you again. Thank you, thank you. So you're wondering why I'm back up here. Now it's my turn to ask questions of the man who has taken over Kennedy Krieger. Before I do, Dr. Schlaggar, though, there's somebody I want to recognize who had to come late tonight. The name Kennedy Krieger was in part named after President John Kennedy because of the family's dedication to people with special needs. And President Kennedy's nephew, Tim Shriver, who is the son of Eunice Kennedy Shriver, is here with us tonight. He's the president of the Special Olympics. He is a champion of children and adults with special needs, just an incredible friend of our families. He and his wife, Linda Potter, I just want to say thank you very much to both of you for being here tonight. Thank you. So, Dr. Schlaggar, it's your turn to talk. You had a wonderful career in St. Louis at Washington University. Why in the world would you give that up to come to Baltimore, Maryland, and to Kennedy Krieger?
Well, thank you for the question and the opportunity to tell you all about that. I'm a child neurologist and a brain scientist, and my whole career, my scientific and clinical career, has been dedicated to improving the lives of children with disorders of the nervous system. For a long time, I have viewed Kennedy Krieger Institute as the pinnacle, as the apex of that mission. And so when this opportunity arose, it was a natural. The first thing I did was ask my wife, Christina. She agreed, thankfully, and we realized that even though we were very, very happy with our lives in St. Louis, our lives had just changed with this outrageous opportunity.
What was it that sold you on the idea? I know Kennedy Krieger there was a national search for the next leader of this amazing institution. What was it that sold you on it? What was it about the opportunity, the possibility that caught your imagination?
So Kennedy Krieger Institute has an enlightened perspective on what it takes to improve the lives of children with disorders of the nervous system. By enlightened, I mean it's not limited to the clinical care. It's not limited to research. Those things are powerful and important, and that's the space that I was in St. Louis. But in addition, it's committed to training the next generation, and we don't emphasize this a lot, but 1,000 trainees a year of the next generation of providers. But in addition, and the thing that really sold it for me, and you talked about it with Jeffrey, the schools. So where does the heavy lifting for a day-to-day basis with cognitive development happen? It's in the schools. So that's an integral part of the approach to improving outcomes at Kennedy Krieger Institute, and it needs to be really shouted about as part of the Enlightenment. My roots are in education. My mom, Sheila, is here in the audience. And 50 years ago, she spearheaded the first gifted program in the Chicago public school system. My origins are understanding the importance of highly individualized approach to education. I think that has inspired really my career. I study brain development because what I want to understand is how to improve those children's lives. And that brain development isn't just happening by coming to see a child neurologist twice a year. It's happening in the schools. So we ask what sold? The comprehensive, integrative approach to improving outcomes. That's what sold me.
People think of Kennedy Krieger as a hospital. I mean, we experienced it as a hospital, but it's much more than that. I mean, the care it's beginning to end, and the people who are providing the care are involved in research. They're working all the time with people who are doing path-breaking, groundbreaking research. Talk, Dr. Schlaggar, about why connecting the research to the care matters. Why does it make a difference?
By understanding fundamental mechanisms for how the brain develops and how that development goes awry, that's the way into making meaningful change. As Amy Bastian said in the video, to mitigate or diminish the effect of a brain injury or a genetic disorder, you need to get it into the system early and know how to change that pathway. The research is giving us the information to know how to do that. And it's paying off in so many different ways, whether we're talking about diseases of the muscle, disease of nerve, the spinal cord, the brain. We at Kennedy Krieger Institute cover that whole spectrum and cover it from mechanism to optimizing clinical care to cutting edge approaches to treatment.
Are we at a, I mean, how do you describe where we are at this point in medical science, in science, in terms of understanding the brain and understanding disorders and injuries of the brain?
We are at a fascinating time where we have the capacity to gather a tremendous amount of information, whether it's the genome or the human connectome or the gut microbiome or anything that has a suffix "ome" at this point. We are able to gather that information, and with the ability these days, from a computational standpoint, forward that information, extract the richness of that information to apply it to a single patient, individualized approaches to therapy and outcomes. So we're on the precipice of being able to take that kind of information and make it impactful at the single patient level. And I think about that not just on the clinical realm, but also in the educational realm. Personalized medicine, personalized education, the full continuum.
I ask you that because I think people hear about the research, or maybe you even read an article about research, but then you wonder, how does it find its way into care? I mean, is there a good example of how new information, whatever's coming of today's research is actually working in the clinic very soon thereafter?
I think the best example right now is probably at the level of diseases of the muscle. Diseases of, and the lower motor neuron, the neuron that innervates the muscle. Diseases like Duchenne muscular dystrophy and spinal muscular atrophy. People like Catherine Wagner at Kennedy Krieger Institute and colleagues elsewhere who have committed a career to improving the lives of children with those disorders, the payoff is happening right now. There are disease-modifying therapies presently available for those diseases and new ones on the horizon that are predicated on the advances in science that's happening right in the moment.
You mentioned, there's so many things I want to ask you. You mentioned the educational programs that Kennedy Krieger does. You've got the school right here near Washington in Silver Spring. What is your dream for Kennedy Krieger's educational program?
The educational program is expansive. We're talking about on the order of 650 to 700 in that range of students, K through 12, with special needs taken care of every year. And we're talking about 11 to 12 month curricula for those students. I think that's a gold mine for understanding how to optimize education. So in those schools, we're collecting lots of information about those students. What we need to do, the dream, is to learn how to apply that information to understand how to optimize each student's individual trajectory. So the dream is to bring that research savvy into the educational system to have truly an evidence-based approach to individualized education.
One of the things you've said tonight that caught my ear, and it's been said several times, is little movements make a big difference. What does that really mean in terms of what Kennedy Krieger does? So
the idea of little movements making a big difference comes from the observation that you heard Bob and Janet talk about and mentioned in the video, that if you have limited movement due to a brain injury or disease, but if you can convince that nervous system to move under volitional control sufficiently to interact with the assisted technology, it can unlock the ability for what the brain wants to do, which is use information to learn how to think, to communicate, to express abstract thought. everything unfolds from that kind of bootstrapping. So a little movement unlocks the potential for a patient that has difficulty moving. So as a movement disorder neurologist, that's what I had been doing most of my time up till this point. My objective was to find ways for patients just like Joey to figure out how to gain control sufficiently to interact with that kind of technology. And then you see the cognition, the language emerge. And once that happens, a highly enriched experience can happen for that patient. And that's the wonder. When I think about Kennedy Krieger Institute, and you mentioned this in your comments as well, it's filled with people who have this calling to be engaged with patients and their families for the long haul. They get involved early, and it's filled with people who recognize that there's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to take commitment for the patient, for the patient's family, for the long haul. And when you walk the halls of the Institute, which I've been able to do for the last couple of months, it's amazing. You're surrounded by people who get that, who impart that passion, whether it's the physicians or the nurses, the staff, security guards, everybody. You have this palpable energy and commitment to the mission of the institution. It's a remarkable place.
It is an amazing place, and again, we are incredibly touched that people who worked with our son Jeff 20 years ago this year are here tonight. We are so touched and so moved that you cared enough to be here tonight. Dr. Bradley Schlaggar, what an amazing opportunity you have in front of you as you take the helm of Kennedy Krieger. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.